The dinner rush at Dalbit House always came in waves, loud, chaotic, and full of impatient voices that never paused long enough to say, "Thank you." But Nia had learned to move through it with ease, weaving between tables with her notepad tucked behind her ear, her curls tied back, her sneakers silent on the polished floor. She liked the job well enough. It paid rent, fed her, and kept her from thinking too hard about the life she'd run from back in Atlanta. But tonight, something felt different. It began the moment he walked in. He didn't burst through the doors or draw attention to himself. He didn't need to. People simply noticed him. A ripple went through the entire restaurant like someone had inhaled too sharply and held their breath. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal coat with a collar sharp enough to cut. His black hair fell in clean waves, and his eyes, dark, unreadable, swept across the room as if he already knew what everyone's secrets were. 4 men followed behind him. Quiet, efficient, watchful. Nia didn't need to ask who he was. Everyone in this district knew of the man people whispered about, the one whose name could stop a conversation mid-sentence. But no one ever said it out loud in the restaurant. Dalbit House was neutral ground. A place where anyone could eat noodles in peace, even if they were the type to make entire neighborhoods flinch. The boss was here. And Nia, unfortunately, was the only server available. She grabbed the menus, plastered on her well-rehearsed customer smile, and walked toward the quiet Storm sitting at table 6. "Good evening," she said, hoping her voice sounded steadier to him than it did in her own ears. "Welcome to Dalbit House. What can I get you all to?" He looked up at her. Not with annoyance. Not with that detached boredom most powerful men wore like armor. No. He looked up at her with curiosity. And for a split second, the noise of the restaurant faded. His gaze flicked down to her name tag. "Nia," he said, his voice low, smooth, and too calm for the tension in the room. "Yes," she replied quickly, because what else was she supposed to say? "Yes, hello, sir, you terrify me. Please order some dumplings and don't get me fired." He ordered for everyone at the table, his Korean measured and decisive. Nia wrote it down, nodding politely, keeping her eyes anywhere but on his face. She didn't need him thinking she was staring. Even if she was. She turned to leave. But she didn't make it 2 steps before the doors at the entrance opened again, and the temperature of the room changed. 2 men walked in. Not customers. Not friendly. Their jackets bulged where jackets shouldn't. Nia's stomach dropped. She recognized them, not by name, but by the way all her instincts screamed danger the moment she saw them. She'd seen men like that before. Back home. Before she fled. Before she promised herself never again. Her heart thudded. She looked back at the mafia boss's table. His men noticed the newcomers. He didn't. He was sipping his tea like this was any other evening. No, this wasn't good. These 2 weren't here for dinner. They weren't here by accident. They were here for him. Nia didn't think. She moved. With the tray still in her hands, she slid quietly behind the boss, pretending to be checking the neighboring table. She set the tray down, grabbed a napkin, and scribbled on the corner with her pen. "Go away. They are coming to shoot you." She folded it once, twice, until it was small enough to hide in her palm. Then, pretending she was refilling his tea, she placed the napkin by his hand without ever looking at him. "Enjoy your meal," she whispered. He lifted his gaze, noticing the note instantly. His eyebrow raised the slightest bit, but he didn't open it yet. Not until she stepped away. Nia walked fast, heading toward the kitchen doorway, and just as she disappeared behind the curtain, she dared to peek back. He had opened the napkin. His jaw tightened. His men straightened. And then, like a shift in the wind, every one of them stood. The boss didn't run. He didn't look scared. He simply said something to his men, quiet but firm, and they moved behind him like shadows following a command. The 2 approaching men reached for their coats. Shots never fired. Because the boss and his men slipped out the side exit faster than the attackers could draw a weapon. Customers screamed anyway. Tables overturned. Chaos erupted. Nia crouched behind the counter, hands over her ears, heart hammering as she prayed that no one would start shooting inside the restaurant. Her manager yelled for everyone to stay down. Someone cried. Someone else ran. But then, sirens in the distance. And the two armed men bolted out the front door. Nia didn't breathe until 10 minutes later, when the police finally arrived. She wasn't questioned. No one even looked at her. She'd blended into the crowd, just another terrified waitress. Which was exactly what she wanted. Because if anyone realized she had warned him, she'd be dead before sunrise. The next 2 days were normal. Or at least they pretended to be. Nia worked her shifts, made deliveries, brewed tea, laughed with the cooks, pretended she hadn't saved a criminal kingpin's life, pretended she wasn't terrified he might think she owed him now, because that was how men like him operated. Debts, favors, shadows. She didn't need that in her life. She didn't need him in her life. But on the third day, near closing time, as she was wiping down table 6, the same table he'd occupied, a shadow fell across the room. A familiar coat. A familiar presence. Her breath caught. He was standing in the doorway. Alone. Nia froze, cloth in her hand, heart racing. He walked toward her quietly, each step measured, like he didn't want to startle her. "I came to thank you," he said gently. "For the warning." She swallowed hard. "You're welcome," she managed, though her voice came out small and unsure. He looked at her, not like a mafia boss. Not like a man assessing a threat. But like someone who'd been thinking about what to say to her for 3 days. "I owe you my life," he said softly. "But I didn't come because of duty." He paused. "I came because I wanted to see you again." Nia's heart didn't just skip a beat. It stumbled. But she shook her head. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "People will see." "I made sure no one followed me," he said. "It's safe." Nothing about him felt safe. And yet, she didn't step away. She didn't tell him to leave. She didn't tell him she'd been thinking about him too. "Can I sit?" he asked quietly. Nia hesitated, then nodded. He took the seat at table 6. She sat across from him. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, neon lights flickered in the reflection of the window, casting soft pink and blue shadows across his face. He looked less like a mafia boss and more like a tired man trying not to drown. "What's your name?" Nia asked finally. He smiled faintly. "Min Jae." And in that moment, something in the air shifted again. But this time, it wasn't danger. It was a beginning. Nia hadn't planned on talking to him. Not really. She'd imagined she would hand him water, pretend to wipe a table, politely suggest he leave, and that would be it. Clean and simple. The kind of interaction that didn't follow her home or crawl under her skin. But now Min Jae was sitting across from her like the world outside the restaurant didn't exist, and she couldn't bring herself to stand up or walk away. "So," she started, unsure why her voice suddenly sounded like it belonged to someone else. "You're okay?" "From the other night." "Thanks to you," he said, his tone quiet but steady. "If you hadn't warned me, I would have been an easy target." She pressed the towel into her palms, trying to steady herself. "I didn't do anything special." "You saved a man's life," he replied. "That is not small." Nia dropped her gaze. Compliments made her uneasy, especially from a man who held the kind of power that could flatten a neighborhood. But his voice didn't have the sharp, commanding chill she expected. It was warm, almost gentle. She cleared her throat. "Why were people trying to shoot you in a noodle restaurant at 9 p.m.? "Bad timing," he said dryly. A surprised laugh escaped her before she could swallow it. She covered her mouth, eyes widening in embarrassment. He stared at her for a second, then smiled, tiny but real. The kind of smile that looked like it didn't appear on his face very often. Nia looked away, pretending to fix her apron. "You shouldn't joke about things like that." "If I don't, I'd go insane." He leaned back slightly, his gaze steady. People like me don't get peaceful lives. We get moments. Brief ones. Like this. Like this. She ignored the flutter in her chest. He continued quietly, I didn't come to involve you in anything dangerous. I won't. But I didn't want to leave your kindness unanswered. You don't owe me, she cut in quickly. He tilted his head. Then let me thank you anyway. Nia opened her mouth to protest, but he held up a hand, not demanding, just asking her to wait. I don't want to repay you with money, he said. Or protection. You didn't ask for anything. That mattered to me. She shifted uncomfortably. Okay, so what do you want to do? Buy you dinner. Nia blinked. Dinner. Yes. Like a date. His voice didn't waver. If you allow it. Her heart did that stumbling thing again. The thought of going out with a mafia boss? Ridiculous. Dangerous. Stressful. Completely out of the question. But the thought of saying no, for some reason, that felt worse. She stared at him, studying the lines of fatigue around his eyes. The way he sat, careful, controlled, as though trying not to take up too much of her space. He didn't talk to her like a threat. He didn't look at her like a trophy. He looked at her like a person. And Nia, who had spent months in Seoul trying to stay invisible, suddenly found herself wanting to be seen. I don't know, she murmured. I work weird hours. I don't date. And people like you. People like me. His tone was not offended, only curious. Your world isn't simple, she said quietly. Mine needs to stay simple. He nodded slowly, as if he respected her honesty. Then I won't pressure you. She hadn't expected that. I'll leave you my number, he offered. If you ever want dinner, just dinner, you can message or call. If you don't, I'll never bother you again. He slipped a small card from the inside of his coat and placed it on the table. No logo. No company name. Just a number. Clean. Minimal. Unassuming. She stared at it like it might explode. You don't have to decide now, he added. Nia swallowed. Why me? He hesitated for the first time. When I looked up at you that night, he said slowly, you were afraid. But you weren't afraid for yourself. You were afraid for me. That doesn't mean anything, Nia whispered, though her voice shook. It means everything, he replied. Her stomach tightened. She stood abruptly, unable to handle the intensity of his gaze. We're closing soon. I need to finish cleaning. He didn't follow her. Didn't stand. Didn't reach for her. He simply rose, buttoned his coat calmly, and gave her a small, respectful nod. Thank you again, Nia, he said. I'll leave quietly. Before she could say anything, he headed toward the door. His steps were soft, ghost-like, a man trained never to be where people expected. At the door, he paused. He glanced over his shoulder, not controlling, not demanding. Just one last look. Her breath caught. Then he left. The door closed softly behind him. And Nia stood there staring at the empty space he'd occupied, hating how her heart felt suddenly too loud. The card sat untouched on table 6. She told herself she wouldn't pick it up. That she'd sweep it into the trash with the rest of the crumbs and receipts. That she'd forget him. But when she walked past the table with the broom, her eyes, traitorous as always, drifted down. Just a card. Just a number. She stood there for a long minute. Then another. The broom handle slipped slightly in her sweaty hands. Oh, for the love of God, she muttered, and snatched the card off the table before her brain could talk her out of it. Nia didn't call that night. Or the next. She tucked the card into her bedside drawer, buried beneath old pay stubs and expired bus passes. But every time she went to sleep, she thought of the moment he'd looked at her with gratitude instead of fear. On the 4th night, she sat on her small apartment bed, phone in hand, staring at the blank message screen. Don't do it, her sensible brain said. Just dinner, her reckless heart whispered. Her thumb hovered. pulled away, hovered again. Finally, she typed, It's Nia. From the restaurant. She stared at the glowing text for a full 10 seconds. Then hit send before she could agonize anymore. The phone chimed almost instantly. A reply. I'm glad you reached out. Are you safe? She rolled her eyes despite the small smile tugging at her mouth. Yes, I'm safe. Are you safe? She typed. Another immediate reply. I'm safe now. Thanks to a certain brave waitress. She groaned into her pillow. But she couldn't hide her smile. You still want that dinner? She finally typed. This time, the pause was longer. 5 seconds. Then, more than you know. Nia's breath hitched. Okay. He didn't try to set a time, or push for details. He simply sent. Whenever you're ready. I'll come to you. She stared at that message for a long while. Slowly, she typed. Tomorrow. After my shift. 9 p.m. outside the restaurant. The reply. I'll be there. Good night, Nia. She swallowed hard, her heart doing flips. Good night, Min Jae. She typed. She turned off the phone. And for the first time in months, maybe years, she fell asleep smiling. Nia spent her entire shift pretending not to be nervous. She wiped tables twice. She rearranged the chopstick holders. She kept glancing at the clock so often that her manager joked he'd tape a watch to her forehead. The cooks teased her in Korean she barely understood. Her hands trembled each time she poured tea. It was ridiculous. It was just dinner. But her stomach refused to listen. Because this wasn't any man. This was Min Jae, the man whose presence could silence a room. The man she had warned without thinking. The man whose voice still echoed in her thoughts when she tried to fall asleep. And as the minutes crawled toward 9 p.m., her pulse got louder than the restaurant's background noise. She finished her shift 2 minutes early and grabbed her coat from the back. She took one last deep breath, checked her reflection in the metal fridge door, smoothed her curls, and stepped outside. The night air hit her instantly, cool and crisp, carrying the scent of street food from nearby stalls and faint exhaust fumes from passing buses. And there he was, leaning casually against a black sedan parked a few meters from the restaurant door. He wasn't surrounded by guards tonight. No convoy. No entourage. Just him. His coat was a deep blue that almost looked black under the streetlights. When he saw her, he straightened, as if he'd been waiting longer than he wanted to admit. Nia, he said softly. She tugged her coat around herself. You're early. His lips curved slightly. I didn't want to risk being late. Something about that, about a man like him being nervous about keeping her waiting, made her cheeks warm. So, she said, clearing her throat. Dinner. He opened the passenger door for her. Anywhere you want. Anywhere? She asked. Anywhere. She hesitated only a second before stepping into the car. They didn't drive to some expensive Skyview restaurant or some underground, secretive place she'd have nightmares about later. Min Jae surprised her. He took her to a tiny late-night dumpling shop tucked between a dry cleaner and a bookstore. The windows were fogged. The sign flickered. Only locals ate there. This is my favorite place, he said as he opened the door for her. You eat here? She asked, genuinely stunned. I grew up 2 blocks away. He gestured to an old framed photo on the wall, a younger version of him, maybe 9 years old, smiling awkwardly next to an elderly couple. My mother brought me here after school. Nia blinked. I didn't expect that. I know, he replied softly. The truth was, she expected his life to be steel and shadows, marble floors and expensive suits. She didn't expect him to have a childhood memory tucked into a dumpling shop. They sat at a small table. No tablecloth. No ambience. Just the smell of fresh mandu and broth. The owner shuffled toward them, eyebrows rising when she recognized Min Jae. Ah. You're back, she said in Korean, whacking him lightly on the shoulder with the menu. And you brought a guest. Good. You're too skinny. Nia snorted before she could stop herself. Min-jae shot her a look that was half offended, half amused. "You understand Korean?" he asked her. "A little," she admitted. "Mostly food vocabulary." "That's all you need here," he murmured. They ordered. And as they waited, Nia found herself studying him. Not the dangerous version of him, but the quiet one sitting across from her in a tiny restaurant that steamed up his hair from the warmth. "This doesn't bother you?" she asked suddenly. "Being out in public?" "It would," he said. "With anyone else." She froze. "Why not with me?" "Because people don't look at you and think, 'danger,'" he said calmly. "They look at you and think, 'ordinary.'" She laughed. "Gee, thanks." He leaned forward slightly. "I mean that as a compliment. You're safe. Honest. You make the world quieter." Nia's laughter faded. Her throat tightened. She didn't know why that struck her so deeply. Maybe because no one had ever described her like that. "And you?" she asked quietly. "What are you like, when you're not being whatever the world thinks you are?" He paused, chopsticks resting between his fingers. "Someone tired," he said finally. "Someone who keeps losing pieces of himself to keep others safe. Someone who doesn't remember the last time he had a conversation without measuring every word." Nia's chest tightened. "Except now," he added softly. "I'm not measuring anything with you." Silence settled between them, warm, comfortable, filled with something she wasn't ready to name. Their food arrived. They ate. They talked about small things, her favorite neighborhoods in Seoul, his childhood memories, how she thought Korean winters were a personal attack on her existence. He actually laughed at that. For a moment, they were just two people sharing dumplings in a tiny shop at 10 p.m. Nothing dangerous. Nothing dramatic. Just human. After dinner, they walked slowly toward the car, though neither seemed in a hurry to end the night. The streets were quieter now. Neon reflections glowed across the pavement. A soft wind brushed Nia's curls. "It was nice," she said. "Tonight." He stopped walking. "More than nice," he said. She swallowed. "Min-jae." He turned to her, his expression gentler than she'd ever seen. "I'm not asking for anything," he said quietly. "Not a relationship. Not loyalty. Not promises. I know my world is heavy. You don't need to carry any part of it." Her chest felt too small. "But if you ever want another night like this," he said, "I'd like to see you again." Her heart thudded. "You're sure that's a good idea?" "No," his lips curved. "It's probably a terrible idea. For both of us." She laughed, unable to hold it in. "But I still want to see you again," he added. The laughter faded. Now her pulse was loud again. Too loud. She took a small step toward him. "One more dinner won't ruin your empire," she said. His eyes softened. "It might," he murmured. "You're distracting." Nia's breath caught. Heat rose to her cheeks. "And your trouble," she whispered back. They stood there in the glowing streetlight, the quiet city stretching around them, neither moving nor speaking. Finally, Min-jae exhaled. "Can I walk you home?" he asked. Her instinct said no. Too vulnerable. Too fast. But her heart said yes. "Yes," she said softly. His shoulders relaxed, almost imperceptibly. He offered his arm, not demanding, not assuming. She hesitated only a moment before slipping her hand through. And they walked. Past quiet shops. Past steamed-up windows. Down familiar streets she had taken alone 1,000 times. But tonight, each step felt different. Less lonely. Less fearful. When they reached her apartment building, she stopped at the front steps. "This is me," she said. He looked up at the building, nodded, then turned back to her. "Thank you for tonight," he said. "You thanked me enough the other day," she replied. "This is a different kind of thank you." Silence again. Soft. Charged. Hopeful. He didn't touch her. Didn't lean in. didn't cross the line. He simply said, "Good night, Nia." "Good night, Min-jae," she whispered. She climbed the first step, her heart hammering in her chest. He turned to leave. She looked back. "Min-jae." He paused. "Yes." She swallowed. "I want to see you again." The expression that crossed his face wasn't a smile. It was something deeper, warmer, real. "Then you will," he said softly. "Whenever you want." And he disappeared into the night. Nia pushed open her apartment door, her pulse still racing, her cheeks still warm, and her heart, finally, unafraid. Because for the first time since arriving in Seoul, she wasn't running. She was choosing. And she had chosen him.